a lot of what they deal with too comes from things like war, immigration, famines, even as far back as like the Black Plague. There's all these different things that a significant group of people experience that can play factors into ancestry that's you're experiencing pieces of in your life right now. Hello, and welcome to That's Just Human, a podcast that explores all aspects of being human, living in a human body, and dealing with life's obstacles. I'm your host, Elisha Light Angel, and by day, I'm a massage therapist, currently a podcaster, but like you, I live in a human body and I have a plethora of life experiences. And this is the place that I like to share some of those experiences and wisdom that I've learned from them along the way. I'm doing a solo episode today, and I am wondering, have you ever found yourself reacting to a situation with like such intensity that didn't feel entirely like yours, or maybe like you're carrying a heavy phantom weight of obligation, of guilt, of fear, and you can't trace it back to any single event in your own life? Perhaps it comes from your lineage, from your ancestry, your DNA, something that's been carried down throughout the line, and now it's showing up in you as a pattern, and that's why you're receiving a trigger inside of you, even though you can't pinpoint why. So, just as we inherit the shape of our eyes, our blood type, or certain different physical traits from our DNA, we also receive an energetic landscape. This could be known as epigenetics, but it's basically a baseline of our survival strategies, our emotional climates, and our unexpected grief that gets passed down through the lineage. So if one of your ancestors, like your mom or your grandmother or great grandmother, experienced a situation that they felt in their body and then their body remembered that. So it could be a simple thing like being afraid of spiders because an ancestor got bit by a spider and now that's become a safety mechanism and it's being passed on down the line. The same thing can happen with other kinds of traumas because our brains are always trying to keep us safe our entire life. No matter what we're doing, it's trying to keep us safe. So we inherit some of these other aspects that come into play as we're trying to navigate life and relationships and just get into adulthood and try to do things on our own. That's when you might come across some kind of a trigger or something. So when we're looking at ancestry, there's really a lot of different ways that one can see it. So you have the DNA that can be traced back. And we all know, as I said earlier, this brings all of those physical attributes that we commonly think of, but sometimes some of those emotional attributes or personality quirks and traits that seem to come through. If you have any of your genetics done with any of those websites, they give you a plethora of information about what your genetic line is telling you and what could be more probable for you depending on your genetics. For instance, I have a 23andMe, and I found it fascinating that they sent me this email one day saying, "Are you genetically predisposed to be afraid of public speaking?" And I'm actually not. So I had no idea that could be a genetic predisposition, but apparently there are certain markers in your DNA that say that you're more prone to be afraid of public speaking than not. And since it's one of America, or not America's, but everybody's top fears, I think at least 50% of people or something like that are afraid of public speaking, maybe even more. So it can be a terrifying concept for many. So that's just one aspect. And then the other one is, that epigenetic aspect. But then there's also ways of different cultures and how they look at ancestors and how they deal with ancestry, a lot of what they deal with too comes from things like war, immigration, famines, even as far back as like the Black Plague. There's all these different things that a significant group of people experience that can play factors into ancestry that's you're experiencing pieces of in your life right now. So here's a few examples of ways that some different cultures deal with. So some cultures, specifically some Asian and African traditions, will set up altars for their ancestors, and they kind of try to keep the ancestors in the loop of their daily life. So they give them offerings of food, of incense, and prayers. And they believe that the dead people are still part of the community. And so they offer protection and blessings in exchange for being remembered of the life that they lived while they were present here on earth, which also goes into the esoteric beliefs that we are a consciousness that exists without this space-time reality. There's another way of looking at ancestry, and this is called family constellations. I'm just going to give you a little excerpt that I'm reading because I had to look all this information up so I could make my little outline to tell you some cool stuff. So this is actually developed by a gentleman named Bert Hellinger, and he is from Germany. And he has this popular therapeutic method that basically looks at how trauma cascades down the family tree. It physically maps out family members in a room, and then it reveals any hidden loyalties and missing or excluded relatives and systemic imbalances that cause modern psychological suffering. So that's my little excerpt. I can't give you a lot more than that, but it's also another way of looking at ancestry. We have the practice of Dia de los Muertos down in Mexico, where they have the Day of the Dead, where they're honoring and remembering all of those who have come before and have passed and are no longer living. But it's a joyful year to celebrate so that these people are never forgotten. They're still remembered within their culture. Likewise, there's also different indigenous cultures that do shamanic journeys, and they drum and they sing prayers and they commune with the ancestors in sacred rituals and seek guidance from them. What I want to get into in looking at ancestral line and things that pop up for us is some of those things that can be triggering, some of those traumas that you don't know why it's there, but it somehow has lingered, some of these patterns that seem to come through in your daily living that maybe you just attributed that's just how it is because my parent is this way and I'm this way and that's just the way it is. But it was passed down and can also be cleared out. And that's what I think the beauty is. We can clear so many things if you are a lineage breaker. So these are like the subtle daily pressure cookers of what's required of you to basically maintain this family equilibrium. These are the silent pacts that are made by you and other family members that you live your life by, whether you're conscious of it or not, and most likely unconscious. So it does take a lot of reflection, a lot of digging deep to try and figure out the more conscious aspects of where these thoughts and these ideas have been passed down and where you're holding on to them. So these different contracts, these different things that you receive as part of being born into the family that you are, can be silent. They can be rules of simply belonging to the family. They're the unwritten laws that your family system is living by. So here's an example. The family motto that is underwritten and silenced is, to belong here, you must not stand out or become too successful because your brilliance makes our survival look like a failure. So as an example, perhaps you had a parent or a grandparent that had to suppress their voice or their dreams in order to survive. And this became that silent contract that you're carrying with you. Another type of contract that we could be carrying with us is emotional debts. So this is when you have a feeling that you owe your life, your choices, or even your happiness to compensate for whatever your parents or your ancestors missed out on. And this becomes incredibly prevalent in themes like motherhood or the oldest daughters. So it's like this debt of sacrifice, again, the silent, unwritten rule of this sacrifice. And a mother sacrifices everything for her children, but she carries this subconscious resentment while she's doing it because she didn't want to do all that sacrifice, but that's what she felt she had to do. It becomes this emotional debt that she's paying. And what it says is that I am not allowed to fully enjoy my freedom or my pleasure because it was brought with my mother's unhappiness. So I must carry the discontent to prove that I love her. Then you have the contract of perpetual struggle, another silent contract. And this one happens whenever we have a deep history of systemic hardship, poverty, or a grueling blue collar labor, having to do the work. This could be whenever you maybe start to become successful and things become a little bit more easy and more abundant, but there's something inside that says this is too easy. This subconscious self-sabotage starts to come in and it overcomplicates your business, or you burn yourself out because you feel like if it's too easy, you can't. So you're bound by this silent family contract that dictates to be authentic, to be an authentic, honorable member of this family, life must be earned through grueling sweat and struggle. And it comes easy if it's dishonest and you are abandoning us. Man, sure would be nice to get rid of that, right? Or how about this emotional debt where you get the unexpressed grief from being a proxy parent? So this occurs whenever a parent or a grandparent experiences a massive and devastating loss. So think like a child that dies, or bankrupting home or business, losing land, losing all that you own in a tragedy. But instead, they swallowed their grief entirely to keep moving forward, because that's what we do a lot. We swallow our grief, keep going. You just don't have an option to stop, so you just push it down. This might look like a child that comes in the next generation after that happens, carrying this baseline chronic melancholy or a profound sense of this phantom grief that they can never fully explain. It just sits with them. They have a great life. They feel an underlying sadness, and they just can't pinpoint it. That's because they're carrying an emotional debt that's acting like this proxy container to hold the and process all of those, basically like the frozen tears of their parents or their grandparents that they were never allowed to cry. So it's sitting inside. How about the silent contract of the shielding child or the marital buffer? So what this is pretty common in families where parents' marriage or the relationship was emotionally vacant or toxic or volatile, or despite the toxicity, they stayed together for the kids. So a child is subconsciously being assigned the role of the peacemaker for their arguing parents. They become the comedian, or they become the hyperachiever to distract the parents from their own misery. As an adult, then this person becomes completely struggling to build their own independent romantic life, or to move away from home because they're operating under this silent contract that says your job is to stand between us and to keep this family from collapsing. If you leave to pursue your own happiness, our destruction is in your hands. Like, this is the silence that comes in with that, right? So you get this good boy, good girl survival loop. So your ancestors have been able to survive for a time when standing out or speaking up or showing any kind of nonconformity meant literal exile or danger from their community, because it used to be much more community oriented than what we are today. So if you're stuck in this good girl, good boy survival loop, then what you might experience is a sudden spike of physical anxiety or panic every single time you try to speak your truth or to publish a bold post online. And you're feeling this historical fear of being exiled, living out in your biology. Let's look at another common archetype that shows up, and that would be the hypervigilant homemaker. So this is more of that modern mother, and she doesn't have the option to rest, to delegate, or to just stop cleaning or managing every detail of the house, even when she is exhausted and wants to just stop and rest. She isn't just a perfectionist. She's running on this inherited survival code from her grandmothers who lived through this poverty or war, where a single dropped ball meant starvation, or it could ruin them even further. And so her body is treating a messy kitchen like a mortal threat. And this becomes this internal battle that is completely wearing. And the last archetype I want to talk about is the shield of I must do it alone. And this is for people that struggle to receive help, struggle to receive love, struggle to collaborate. And it comes back to the lineage of sudden loss or betrayal, such as like a grandfather whose business partner ruined him, or a grandmother who suddenly was left widowed with young children. So the inherited frequency then comes and shows up and says, people are dangerous, or relying on anyone else equals destruction. And so then it falls back into, I must do it alone. So now that we've looked at different ways the ancestral patterning can show up, and by all means, this is not an exhaustive list. There are so many variety of things that people can go through and things that can be passed down through the line, and situations and patterns and ways of living that you could be experiencing and you have absolutely no idea why. So now we have the pattern interruption or the lineage breaker. And that's when you recognize one of these patterns that's coming up in your life, and then you're able to start consciously making an effort to put a stop to it. And not every one that comes into a family is going to be a lineage breaker. Some of us are just carrying it down, and then some people get tasked with breaking a lot of different things that have been passed down through the line and saying, I'm not going to allow this to take hold of me anymore. And if I pass my genes down to anyone, I'm not going to allow that to be passed down ancestrally to them anymore. So when you are a lineage breaker, a pattern breaker, a pattern interrupter, you're more likely probably one of those people that might be listening to my podcast right now because you enjoy some self-growth and enjoy reflecting on life and on yourself and different things about that. And through that reflection are able to even evaluate your own behaviors and tap into things that you recognize that maybe you're repeating behaviors that you've witnessed in your mom or your dad or your grandparents. And then you don't want to do that anymore, so you consciously make that effort to stop. There are times that this really might feel like a betrayal, and working through that is part of the process, because you're breaking these emotional debts, these silent contracts. But taking it back to that example of self-sabotaging, when you start to become more abundant or things start to become easier, well, it was getting easier and you started to get to experience that. Well, how nice. And then you start sabotaging. So what if you could live your life without having that self-sabotage, and then you get into easier living because you were able to clear that patterning How amazing is that? So this is one of the ways that I present that we can do ancestral work, but it really goes back to some of our day-to-day evaluations of ourselves. Now, I want to share with you something that I have been doing over the past several months. I've been learning how to work multidimensionally with frequencies. It is some of the most amazing work I have ever come to in my life. And I am going to be having several different offerings of what is called a print. And basically, in short, a print is a bioenergetic scan of your biofield and then sending frequencies multidimensionally to target your biofields and help bring your original blueprint back into coherence and resonance with who you are to be. And so this can tackle all sorts of different areas of life. And I have a specific print called the Ancestral Bedrock, and it looks at some of the ancestral patterns that you might be carrying that have been passed down from the paternal and the maternal side. It's very sacred in its offering. It's very, very deep, and it will be very accurate. And everyone that I have run this for so far has been touched deeply, possibly even cried, because it's been that touching and that deep. And I would like to offer it to you, and you can have 50% off. It's normally $111, but I'll do a little bit less than 50%. We'll just do 55 even instead of 55.50. And if you let me know that you heard about this on That's Just Human, I will give you that. You can reach out to me at Elisha at ElishaLightAngel.com. Let me know you were listening to my episode. You would like to experience that, and I will more than happily do this sacred multidimensional work with you and hopefully blow your socks off and help you in your own shifting and healing journey. The other thing I'd love to give you today is something that you can do at home. So this is like a revocation ritual. So go ahead and find a space in your house that you can light a candle and where you can sit down with both of your feet on the floor. Feet on the floor is going to be very grounding. It's going to help the energy circulate through your body. And then you want to take 3 intentional breaths. Your hands, you can have them resting on your thighs. You can put them in your heart. You can put one on your stomach, one on your heart, wherever feels the most comfortable. Just use your intuition and you will know what is the right space for you to put your hands, because it's just going to feel right to you. So then take your 3 intentional breaths. This is you setting your sacred space, and give yourself just, a little nod or a little smile that this is your own practice. Have a pen and a paper, and you can write down a specific silent contract or an emotional debt that you think that you're carrying. You can do this if you already know. Otherwise, you can also do some automatic writing where you just start writing and writing and writing until for like 10, 15 minutes, something like that, till it comes out, but having this be the focus of what you're writing. And the goal being something that you want to return, that you don't want to carry with you anymore, that you're tired of this being a pattern showing up in your life and making things harder on you. So then you want to have some kind of verbal decree, like you're speaking out loud to clear this out. And that's going to help you shift. So here is something along the lines of what you can say. You can use this verbatim, what I tell you, or you can come up with your own little phrase. Say, I recognize the weight of insert whatever it is that you're carrying with your lineage belongs to the line, not to me. I know the survival is provided for my ancestors, but I am no longer able to carry it. I return this frequency to the source with love, and I terminate this contract. It ends with me. Then, after you have stated it out loud, you want to release this back into the cosmos. So there's a few different ways that you can do this. You can burn the paper that you wrote this on and let the smoke carry that up. You can bury it in the earth, or you can dissolve it in water to symbolize the closing of this ledger. So there's options in creating this little ritual for yourself, but it also helps to set it into your body and into your own subconscious that this is not something that you're going to carry with you anymore. And you can do this anytime you figure out something that you're carrying that's not yours, because that's just like putting more rocks in a backpack. If you're carrying a backpack and then having to carry more, why would you want to do that? Certainly it's not comfortable. So I hope this gives you a good idea of some different ancestry attributes and things to clear them. If you resonated with this and you think a friend would resonate, I would really appreciate you sharing, helping get my podcast out there. You can hop on YouTube, subscribe, comment, leave me 5 stars on Apple iTunes. All of these things help me out, and I am just here to try and help serve people, you, and anyone else who might come across my podcast in the future. As you embrace your humanness, be kind, be you, and remember, everything is part of the journey.